So our next speakers are Rodrigo and Eladio, and I don't know how you two are dividing things, but can I let you sort of introduce yourselves? And
Sure thing.
okay.
Now, as I'm not English speaker, as native speaker, right? I'll have to read a little bit, right? But I hope you understand me better, especially the translator, right? So I'm Rodrigo Fernández, and I work with Eladio Garcia, right? Correct. And we are gonna give a presentation about wind farm impacts on birds and bats, right? We will talk about planning, we will talk about baseline studies, a little bit about mitigation and monitoring overview, right? But I'm happy to see that the GILANTED approach is quite similar to ours. And that means that we're probably in the right way or in the same way, right? And I said, as about us, we run a company of 25 staff called Biodiversity Node. We focus on biodiversity studies and management and conservation. And during the last 10 years, we have been working deeply in renewable energy projects in Spain and other countries during all the phases from early conception, impact assessment and detailed design, construction and operation. We work mainly with energy companies, but also with public administration and also research institutions and ONGs. And again, as Jill was showing, I will talk a little bit about the wind power energy trends, right? So everyone knows that the wind power energy development trend is reaching a new peak every year as we speak, right? So wind installations are increasing, and it is predicted that will keep increasing annually during the next decades. Cost of wind turbines has been dropping for onshore and wind energy, and effectiveness of turbines has been increased. So currently, the companies are installing 6 to 7 megawatts turbines, when 10 years ago, 15 years ago, only 1 megawatt turbines were installed. But more importantly, especially for bats, the cut-in wind speeds has also been dropped. So it used to be 6 or even 7 meters per second speed, but now has dropped to 3 to 4 meters per second, right? And that is having dramatic effects in bats fatalities. So rotors efficiency as well is increasing, and the height of the turbines is reaching 200 meters, which is a huge amount in terms of bird collision. But also the diameter of the turbines is increasing. So they're reaching now 170 meters or nearly 190 meters diameter. So that covers an enormous amount of surface, able to kill a bird or a bat. But it's clear that the abandonment of fossil fuels and the shift to renewable energies is inevitable for attaining carbon neutrality by mid-century as the Paris Agreement. So it's forecasted that the wind energy will form 35% of all renewable energy by 2050, right? So what happened now is that the trends around the world show Asia as a major area for wind power development after the development in the USA and North American countries and also the European countries. But it happened as well that the information and the studies in terms of environmental impact assessment and monitoring and mostly happening in Europe and USA, and especially the sharing of the knowledge of this, and Australia, of course, and especially of the sharing of the knowledge achieved, right? So that leads to an important gap of knowledge of the impact, of the real impact of wind energy in different ecosystems and species, such as Central Asian mountains and steppe habitats. And that's why we're here, in order to bring that gap, to shorten that gap, right? So talking about the effects of wind energy on birds and bats, and in agreement with Gill's presentation, there are three main impacts globally detected and recognized when wind energy is developed. First of all, direct collision mortality. Second is the habitat degradation or even loss. And then the barrier effects to movement, right? Obviously, the best known impact is the direct collision mortality. But as we speak, there are many, many studies that are working now in habitat degradation, and especially the barrier effects to movement that this new technology is impacting on. So about the when we focus in total number of individual skill, there are many reviews that have been done I mean, considering many studies all around the world, and it happens that the bats show higher mortality rate than birds, right? So you can see here. Sorry, the pointer is. So you can see here, I highlighted in red the figures for bats, right? In Romania and Mexico and Texas, they have found really high mortality rates for bats, even peaking up to 43.79 bats per megawatt per year. If you add up this to the number of megawatts that have been installed in these countries, or are going to be installed in these countries in the next years, that makes a real concern for the survival of many species of this group. But in birds, it's also showing that there are figures that are quite dramatic in terms of the number of birds that are killed by this technology, right? So what happened again is that most studies done into the collision risk between species and wind turbines, right, but have taken place in industrialized countries. So potential effects for many locations and species therefore remain unclear, right? So for birds and bats, larger turbine has been found that capacity in terms of megawatts increase collision rates. So that's something to keep in mind when designing these infrastructures. Now, talking about mortality and the most affected groups, Thaxter, in his review, found that talking about birds, diurnal raptors and seabirds and water birds, passerines and terrestrial birds, or swifts and pigeons are the most affected groups. And in terms of the bats, the migratory species or the species that feed in high heights are also receiving the worst impacts. See, you can see some examples of the most the species with the highest risk, right? So in terms of the Raptors group, they saw that more than a half, 54%, of the endangered species threatened by wind farms are raptor species, right? Now, there is another important question that we want to try, that we would like to get solved, which is what are the main drivers of mortality, right? The main traits. Thaxter also has described then in its review, showing that while avian collision rate was affected by migratory strategy or dispersal distance and habitat associations, the bat collision rates were influenced by dispersal distance mainly. So what happened also is that high risk at aggregation sites, there is high risk at aggregation sites such as migratory bottlenecks or near breeding colonies. And it happens that wind energy could therefore reduce populations, specifically the long-lived, slow reproducing species and wide-ranging or migratory species. That is happening to bats and birds as well. But we also have to focus in local conditions, because all the information that I gave you before, and it's in line with the Gilles presentation, it's very important. It's very important for the overall understanding. But when you go down to the local conditions, you have to keep in mind as well in the studies things like details like nesting places and core areas or in bird territories, or juvenile dispersion areas, or roosting spots and local migration routes. And of course, attraction spots in countries like Spain, where we have a decent population of scavengers, landfills, for example, or cattle carcass disposal spots are really important. And you have to understand properly this information before planning your wind farm. But also wastewater treatment plants or wetlands are also focus of attraction that must be taken into account during the design. So if we now focus in habitat degradation or loss, we find that there are two different effects. First of all, you have indirect effects at the landscape scale, such as avoidance of tall structures or noise or lights. We'll see some examples in the next slides about these effects, or directly the direct loss, right? Because the wind turbines or the platforms or the roads or the transmission poles are affecting the habitat, right? So we wanted to show three examples of this, demonstrated effects, right? Such as displacement from feeding or nesting areas, the behavioral changes, or predation rate changes. So we talk about displacement from feeding or nesting areas. Taber and his colleagues, they found that some species could show different patterns of displacement. Taber found that two species, the prairie chicken and the sage grouse, both ground-dwelling species, show different responses from total displacement to an expansion of their movements, right? So, so even knowing that the displacement could happen, understanding of the potential effects of the different effects that in the same population makes more difficult to understand the long-term impacts in bird fauna. In Spain, there is a group of researchers that are working deeply in steppe birds, and they found working with a special species, which is the Dupon's lark. It's an endangered species. It has been declared last year in Spain as endangered of extinction, right? And they found that the effects of the wind turbines could be noticed by different populations of this bird as far as 4.5 kilometers of distance from the wind farms, right? And the closer the worse effects, right? It's not known yet, or at least completely, but many of these long-distance effects may be due to noise or signal lights from the turbines. And talking about behavioral changes, this group of people found as well that wind farm noise shifts vocalizations of these threatened species, right? So the same research group has demonstrated effects in the vocalization of the Dupon's lark, probably due to the noise that produce the rotating turbines, right? Which is something that is normally not considered in the impact assessments, right? And it could affect as well the behavior of the population and the response to the new facility. Also, as I said before, wind farms can produce a change in the predation rates. The same researchers group found that an increased presence of predatory mammals in the vicinity of the wind farms is a normal situation after the installation of these turbines. So here you can see the green dots that are showing the relative abundance of large mammals, predators, and as long as the surface area of gravel roads increases, the predation rate also increases. So for ground-dwelling species, for nesting or for feeding or for finding refuge, this is an important effect that should be also taken into account. Now, going and moving forward to the next effect, the barrier effect to movement, which means, for example, roots displacement, could be experienced by a large number of species, right? Talking about birds. Marcus did a review of different monitoring studies on wind farms across the entire globe, and the overall results show in a few cases some species are being attracted to wind farms, which is also dangerous for them because they are in higher risk of being collided. So, but also there was a significant amount of studies showing no effect in many groups of species. But again, some groups, such as anseriforms or falconiforms, many raptors, the main effect was the displacement. So this has been already demonstrated and should be also taken into account in the studies. In Spain, we had the opportunity to experience this effect as we were doing some collaborations with our colleagues in Portugal, because they sent us information about a lost GPS device that was installed in a little bastard. Right, this bird again, as the same with the Dupon's lark, this bird is in danger. This bird has been declared as in danger of extinction last year in Spain, and as a result of this, many investigations are happening for this bird. This is a steppe bird that of course, especially in South Spain and Eastern Spain and Portugal and also Central Spain. And they live normally in agricultural areas, but they have migratory movements, especially during the summer, right? And what happened with this bird is that when moving from the south of Spain to the north of Spain, they have to cross a high mountain, and they look for the best pass, for the best places to pass. And with this animal that was tagged, we saw that the animal had to avoid wind infrastructure in its movement. So you can see here that the bird, when arrived there, had to wait until the decision was done and did a different way in comparison with previous data. So that has an interesting fact, because what's happening here is that, I mean, this is the existing wind farm, right? And this is an old wind farm from the 90s, and it has a short distance between wind turbines. But it happened here that there is another promoter, there is another company that is trying to install another wind facility. You can see the distance between the different turbines, right? And if this wind farm would be installed, these migratory birds could have a problem when migrating through this area. So that also, it's a very interesting found that can lead to a different perspective when undertaking the impact assessment. Now, we have covered already the impact or the most recognized impacts of wind turbines with examples. And we wanted to talk about mitigation, right? And to talk about mitigation, Jill also show briefly how to approach this, right? And what we wanted to say is that the mitigation hierarchy is probably the best system or the best approach that should be considered when installing new facilities. That obviously works for wind farms, but also for photovoltaic plants or any kind of new infrastructure that is new, right? The mitigation hierarchy pretty much works like if you have a baseline level of biodiversity, and then the experts identify the impacts, then the impact should be mitigated in the following way. First of all, you have to avoid the impacts, right? All the avoidable impacts should be considered. For those impacts that cannot be avoided, then you should work in the minimization of the impacts. And if you cannot minimize, then you should restore those impacts, right? But at the end of the day, you're going to have some impacts that cannot be avoided or minimized or restored. And these are called the residual impacts. And these are the impacts that you're going to have to offset, right? You can offset, obviously, to get a known net loss. But if possible, you should be working to a net positive impacts. So then if we follow this path, we have the avoidance phase as the first step, right? And when talking about initial planning, when talking about avoidance, the initial planning is a key step on it. So pre-feasibility analysis is a really good tool that can help you to understand the situation using key species or migration routes or protected habitats or protected areas. And if you analyze all this information before the facility is constructed, that can lead you a project with less impacts and also could prepare you to or could prepare the promoter of the company of the infrastructure to propose realistic alternatives, right? Because sometimes they just go directly to the place that they want, but in reality, or at least in Spain or in Europe, the proposal of different alternatives is a key action in the impact assessment process, right? It's also the best moment to define the baseline studies that you're going to have to undertake, right? Obviously, there are baseline studies that are common, but depending on the key species that you found in your pre-feasibility analysis, you could find the need of undertaking a specific surveys to understand the situation, right, of the biodiversity. And talking about initial planning, migration routes are also very, very important, right? So when the initial planning for location of a new wind farm is undertaken, migration routes should be studied deeply. Current tagging technologies and big data analysis can provide enough information for this understanding. In this figure, you can see the analysis that Gold and its group undertook in order to understand avian sensitivity and vulnerability to collision risk from wind farms interactions in Europe and North America. So it happens that this data compiled by Gold show the current risk of collision with existing wind farm infrastructures. So this data, the good thing of this data is that they are available to be used by government planners or promoters or consultancy companies or NGOs, right? So our company in our studies, in our pre-feasibility studies for these kind of facilities, so we use it for understanding the risk of a new wind farm in the south, in Spain. And I brought a specific example of a new wind farm being planned in the south of Spain during the pre-feasibility assessment. So this is the country scale, and you can see here that pretty much all these data are showing a huge corridor of migration, right? It happens that the Iberian Peninsula is in the middle of the way from many birds in Europe going down to Africa, and all the wind farm new installations are posing a risk for these migration birds, right? And there you can see the same data, but in a closer look, right? So at a regional scale, using a 5 per 5 kilometer square grid. So you can see that the location in detail shows a current very low risk situation for the wind farm that we were assessing, right? Which is here. Meaning that there are no other facilities around that already could be imposing collision risk. So mainly this information is a good tool to understand the potential of a new wind farm to elevate the collision risk of an area, and also to understand the potential of creating cumulative or synergistic impacts. So there is also a really good tool that can be developed and should be developed by governments, which could help a lot the planning phase of a new facility. This is the same example that we were looking at before, right? This is the location of the wind farm. So the Spanish government has developed an official sensitivity GIS map that companies can use to understand the risk of affecting natural and social values of significant importance, locating the new renewable energy projects. So project areas, endangered fauna recovery areas, caves with bat colonies, wetlands, and other information about nature conservation is included in this cartography, right? So you can see here, for example, a protected area. You can see here towns. You can see here other kind of restoration areas for endangered fauna, right? So this is a perfect tool for, at least in the first stage, locate the new facility. And there is also a great importance when you go to specific data, right? Time? Okay, I will go quicker. Right. So specific data collected during previous surveys is also quite important, right? In this picture, you can see previous data of great bustard, which is this bird. It's also in danger. It's a steppe bird, right? And the area where this new wind farm facility was going to be installed was in a steppe area, right? So if you remember this map, so in this situation, your facility could be in a really good position, but if you have a look at the detail of some species, when you do undertake the specific surveys, then the situation could be riskier. So with all this information, what we do is we create tailored maps for each facility when we do all the pre-feasibility assessment. And what normally happens is that the promoters are ready to change or and find new locations, right? But even with a situation where you can find a really good position, you could find different situations when you start to do the pre-construction surveys. So here in this figure, right, you can see a wind farm baseline study that is being carried out as we speak. Blue line shows the limit of the surveys, which is 2 kilometers away from the potential location from the wind farms, right? We had here 3 alternatives, right? And in these alternatives, you can see that there are different risks of collision for different birds, right? So this figure, what it's showing is GPS locations and different types of flight that were recorded in the field, right? And during the field assessment, we also found that there is a landfill here it's marked with the white star, and we found it that many birds, scavengers and raptors were going there to feed, and they were coming from these protected areas here, right, in this direction, and it happens that the south alternatives that were in principle, or at the beginning, were in a best position regarding the protected areas up north, in reality are in a worse position because of the result of the local migratory movements of the birds, right? So probably when we finish the study, our advice to the promoter, to the company, will be to select this alternative as the preferred one. Now, going to the minimization stage, we wanted also to show what happens when you don't do the right things before you put a wind facility, right? So this slide shows 3 wind farms that we have been working with since 2015. These wind farms. So each circles means a wind turbine, right? And you can see here, there are different colors, right? Each color means collisions with griffon vulture accumulated during a period of from 2009 to nowadays. So you can see that there are different rates of collisions, right? So there are turbines that they merely have collisions, and there are other turbines that really have a high number of collisions. So the problem was made in the first place because planning of these wind turbines was done without field studies, and so the short field studies that were done weren't properly done, as there is a high number of shepherds in all these areas, right? That they are living there, and they have more than 6,000 heads of sheep. And 1 minute, okay. And they have permission to dump the carcasses in the field, so scavengers are also fed, right? So here you can see that the collisions were peaking, right? And the company had to pay a fine of $7,000 per each collision, right? What happened that in 2014 and 15, they were scared about keep going with this number of collisions and paying an enormous amount of fines. So they called us, and we started to work with the shepherds, so we could agree with them in relocating the disposal places for the carcasses, right? What happened here is that one of the shepherds got angry with the situation, and he started to dump again the carcasses in the vicinity of the wind farm. So the collisions peaked again. So we have to get back to him and fix the agreement that we have with him. And now the collisions are going down, right? So I think these are some examples, right? We want more, right? We wanted to show more, but I ran out of time. But hopefully we can give some time for questions.
So we have the break now. So I think if people want to get some break, they should. There's tea and food, but maybe we can stay for questions for other people who have questions. So.
Please wait for the microphone. Thank you.
You mentioned for bad categories, high feeders mean that aerial hawking feeding?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Okay, you mentioned in one of the slides, high feeding. This means that aerial hawking feeding or something different?
Well, you mean in terms of collision and in terms of the different heights of feeding? Right. You mean the first slides?
Yeah, one of the beginning, yeah.
Right.
For bats, yeah.
Well, that's happening with bats, right? And it happened that the research have found that lower dwelling species have less risk than higher dwelling species, right?
Matthias Schmidt from BirdLife Austria. I have a question. We are talking about planning and zoning and avoiding this problem of collision and so on. But in my experience, there is a game changer coming on the horizon or already arrived with this shutdown on demand systems, which seems to be more or less now or becoming state of the art. And at least in Austria, we have the situation that it's not necessarily important anymore if there is a sensitive species breeding or in high abundance, because the argument is we shut down on demand. We can build it anyway because we have there a total mitigation, more or less. Do we have this experience in other countries as well, or is it just a point of a way of seeing this issue in Austria?
Ella, do you want to answer? Right.
Okay, so in Austria we have the situation that the companies are coming with this shutdown on demand systems, so namely Identified, and it seems that for the approval of wind farm, it's not necessary anymore to have sensitive mappings or something like this, because they can say we can do the shutdown on demand system,
Our experience,
reduce the collision to zero.
yeah, our experience with the shutdown devices are like this. I mean, we have been working in several wind farms with these different devices. And first of all, depending on the device that you buy, that you install, there are huge differences in the effectivity, right? And also, there are some species, for bats, for example, the technology is not developed yet or not sufficiently developed, right? But also there are some species that forage near the ground, right? And are not really well detected. In Spain, we have a lot of species that are steppe species, right? That live in agricultural areas, and these devices are not working really well with them, right? And it also depends on the type of the fly of this species, right? So for big raptors, it may work, right? But with small passerines or small birds, it's not working, right? We've been working in wind farms where most of the with these devices, most of the collisions with big birds were avoided, but passerines still had a high rate of collisions.
But
I can just continue on what Thomas meant to say, I think, is that developers and entrepreneurs, they are using those tools that are being developed as an excuse to put that wind turbines wherever they want. And as you say, it's not a magic solution. We have a case in northern Israel and the Golan Heights, in the best place in Israel for vultures and scavengers. And the developers just brought a company from Portugal, and they presented this shut-on-demand method, and they managed to deliver the program, and the turbine are now being raised. Yeah.
But do they have post-construction monitoring? Because
yes, they're doing this, but
and what's going on?
It shouldn't have been constructed in this
in the first place. You're right, but if it's constructed, at least you should have construction monitoring to demonstrate that it's
demand there. But what we still have casualties, even though it was just being operated now. We already have some casualties of short-toed eagles, etc. So it's not a magic solution.
I mean, it's not a magic solution. That's right. That's the answer. Yeah.